Fear means false evidence appearing real. And I use that to this day often. False evidence appearing real. And I'll ask that often if I feel fear. A real turning point in my life that I just was living well below my abilities and wasn't expecting as much of myself. But this showed me what was deep down inside of me. And I'm very, 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 very proud of that time in my life. My entire life and career has been about feeling such a strong passion towards people. And I feel a lot of gratitude when I can take my life experiences and help somebody else or lend a ear to listening to what they may be going through. I said, all right, I will listen to you. And I did. And then I stayed on another year after we sold, but that was a huge turning point in my life. That was very, very, very traumatic. So being grateful is having that energy and that mindset and the wherewithal to just get through my day and accomplish those goals I've set, if that's on a personal level or business.
Why is this happening to me? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why is this happening to me? I know that I have. In some of the most challenging times of my life, that was something I was asking multiple times per day as I wrestled with the challenge of dealing with something that just seemed too difficult and too heavy to carry. If you felt that way, you'll enjoy the conversation that I have today with Linda Herzog. Linda has had a wonderfully successful career growing businesses and now as a leadership coach with Herzog Leadership Consulting and also in aviation. Linda coaches women who are working through the ranks of leadership positions in aviation. She uses the things that she's learned from the periods of her life when she's asked the question, why is this happening to me, to help others navigate the difficult situations in life and business that they're facing. I'm delighted today to have as my guest Linda Herzog. Linda, you've said that your purpose is to always feel grateful. What does feeling grateful mean for you?
It's a beautiful question. Grateful is I think, waking up each day, and it's really about a feeling within me that I'm happy. I want to get accomplished what I've set for that day. And as we all know, there's those days that we don't want to get accomplished what we've set out to do and so on. So being grateful is having that energy and that mindset and the wherewithal to just get through my day and accomplish those goals I've set, if that's on a personal level or business. And I love doing business, and when I accomplish what I've set out to do and I'm successful in that, it's a feeling of gratefulness, and I'm proud of that.
So, if I can rephrase and ask a question with this, it sounds like gratitude is accomplishment. Is that accurate, or do you feel like there's more to it for you than accomplishment? So if I were to, I have a document that I keep open sitting right in front of me, and it's called Winning Today.
Mm-hmm.
And I put down on that document what winning today looks like for Alan.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because if I don't define it, and I can get to the end of the day or the middle of the day and go, wow, what have I accomplished today?
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy not to feel like I'm winning. So is accomplishment how you feel gratitude, or is there more to it there for you?
Much more, yes, Alan. I would put at a very strong second in that, or first, being giving back to people. My entire life and career has been about feeling such a strong passion towards people. And it's very, I feel a lot of gratitude when I can take my life experiences and help somebody else, or lend a ear to listening to what they may be going through. And so it just fills my soul with happiness, gratefulness. And I feel I've given back. And again, there's that word I was just going to say, I feel like I've accomplished something, but at a greater level, higher
Okay.
level.
So also then accomplishing something for someone else or helping
Yes.
them accomplish something.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here with you, Linda. You run a successful leadership consulting business. You've been a high performing executive all over the world, involved with private aviation. So the skeptic in me looks and says, well, it's pretty easy for Linda to be grateful because her life is great. She has friends, she has money, she's a successful coach. But what about the guy that doesn't have any of that stuff? Or what
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, you know, the moments when your life isn't great? Then how do you experience gratitude then? Or is that something that you've had to learn and to work on?
Mm-hmm. Wow, you ask great questions, Alan. That takes it into such a deeper level, and it hasn't always been there. The gratefulness, the happiness, the success. Um, I think my life stories have gone so many different paths that have brought me to a place where I do feel that gratefulness. But it really had to be learned, but it also had I've always been, for me, a spiritual person that does pray. I do, uh, that's a very important part of my life. I feel the strength from that worship and the praise that is in my being. And again, not always has been there. But it's, I think that person that maybe doesn't feel the gratefulness, the happiness, the success, it's interesting now. I'm drawn to that person as well because I want to share, to either help them bring that into their life, help understand where they are in their life. And I think I kind of am drawn to that in my coaching business because I have a strong desire to bring gratefulness to help them get to that point in their own life.
Have you been that person before that didn't have that? And is
Mhm.
that why you feel drawn to help? And if
Yes.
so, what did that version of Linda look like and what led you there?
Wow. I think it's several things in life. I think, oh gosh, one that goes pretty far back is one with my husband. Not to get into a lot of detail, but a real tragedy happened in his life that affected our entire family. And it
Mhm.
changed, I mean, literally completely. And it took him from us for a period of time. And at the time, we owned a business, a staffing company, Personnel Resources. And we had just started the business. So it, you know, I had to go very, very, very deep, taking care of two children, running a company that was brand new. So much so, it literally changed my life. I did not even know that I had the strength to get through all of this and the ability to run a company, to take it to, in 7 years, successfully sold to an international firm. Wasn't even asking for it. They came to me and I turned them down 3 times. And then finally I said, all right, I will listen to you. And I did. And then I stayed on another year after we sold, but that was a huge turning point in my life. That was very, very, very traumatic, to our entire family. So, I think that was one of my true, when I look back on it, it changed. I became a different person, much stronger. My capabilities. I never thought that I could do something like this, and so that was, a real turning point in my life, that I just was living well below my abilities and wasn't expecting as much of myself. But this showed me what was deep down inside of me. And I'm very, 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 very proud of that time in my life.
Now, that's an interesting statement, to look back at a period to where you identify that there was some trauma, not just for you, but for your family, and to be able to say that you're proud of that now. Was that a long process to be able to look back? Because I have to imagine that while you're going through it, the first thoughts in your mind aren't, I'm so proud of the fact that this is happening right now. Was there ever any shame associated with that? And if so, how did you transition from a feeling of shame to feeling proud or
Mhm.
grateful
Mhm.
for that difficult experience?
I think, Alan, the shame was I became a cocoon, and lived a very private life to handle all that was happening. It was overwhelming. It was beyond words that, you know, am I really, really going to get through this? And so, yes, it was a very long process, yet really a desire to, one step at a time, one step at a time. And I had a tremendous amount of support, but in a very small circle of, especially my mother and father and my family, and just maybe 2 or 3 friends. But it was very private and very small. So I stayed in a very small world for probably a good 4 to 5 years. And then as that started evolving and changing, and I allowed a greater support system in, I got even stronger. And I think my successes, uh, with my children and then with our business, that in itself helps you rise above the circumstances, to then begin to recognize, maybe I am doing something good here, and I don't have to be shameful.
How did what you learned through that experience help you in other difficult life experiences that came after that?
Wow. Um, it's like it wouldn't even compare. It was so minuscule. Not everything that happened in my life in the future, but most everyday occurrences. eh, this is easy. This is a cakewalk. You know, um, it's easy. I can get, if I can get through that, I can get through this. So it would take me back to see what I really got myself through. So this doesn't compare.
I like to say when I look back at the difficult things that I've had that I know what my worst day looks like.
Exactly.
And this isn't anywhere close to the worst day. So I'm going to be
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
It will be just fine. Yeah, and just like
Exactly.
you said, I survived that. I made it through that. This is hardly even a challenge.
Yeah.
So
And
because
that's
you
those moments, Alan, you do feel your strength that, wow, I am stronger. Like, this isn't going to take me down. This almost did. But you, you're, there's also that you feel proud and you feel stronger, and so that helps you get through so many other things.
I'm going to transition a little bit here. So we've talked about gratitude, we've talked about shame, we've talked about pride. I'd like to talk about passion. What are you
Mm.
passionate about? What motivates you? What gets you excited?
Um, Ellen, it's like I graduated from college, I got my teaching credential, and I thought that was my direction, yet not in the traditional of the classroom scenario, because I've been a teacher my entire career, teacher, coach, whatever, consultant, you know. But I graduated from college, and, we all sit ourselves down and say, okay, what's really my career going to look like? And I gave it a really, really strong and passionate thoughts and thinking about it. And I literally came up with one sentence, and that is, I am passionate about people.
Hmm.
And my career has been that from the moment I had that thought. And it's all levels, all types, all male, female, whatever. I just, people fascinate me, and I love to hear about their life stories and where they've come from, where they want to go. And so, without a question, passionate about people.
So that leads me to another question. You probably deal with people that you're coaching that are struggling to know what their passion is.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help someone navigate that? How do you
Mm-hmm.
identify what your passion is? I tried a lot of different sports. I did a lot of different hobbies. I've done a lot of different businesses. I feel like it took me quite a while to figure out what my passion was. But how do you guide someone through that process? Because for me, it was just kind of shooting in the dark. I feel very fortunate to have discovered it now. But how do you guide someone through that?
And you know what? You more or less just answered it, Alan. I encourage them to try, so often, and so did I, Alan, and there were so many times, oh, I don't even know what I like because I've done this, I've done that. But I think that's a colorful life. That's, you experimented in all types of businesses, you yourself, Alan. And then I bet every single time you did that, you drilled something of value. All right. I love this. Or you discarded some aspect of that business, or you didn't do that business again. That's how you learn what you're passionate about. And then, so I think that's a perfect example, and that's okay. But the other I really like to do, Alan, is I do kind of like a seven level deep of what are you passionate about? And you ask why 7 times. It's the most incredible experience. And you can ask any question you want, and then you do 7 times of why. Well, I'm passionate about people. Why? Because they're interesting, they're fascinating. Why? Why? And it's an amazing exercise that by the time you get to the seventh one, the hope is you feel emotion. And that emotion is what makes you passionate. And then I also really try to draw from people what Are you interested in that you never have to work up the energy to do it? You never have to second guess yourself. You could do it on and on and on again. And you know what most people say, Alan? It typically the answer when when they're answering that part of it, it's usually a hobby, and it's usually a sport or something. And then what I do is whatever that answer is, I take that into a business and or a career opportunity or something to that effect. And it's amazing. That's most of the time where the passion lies, is what they do in their spare time or sports or whatever.
I love that. You're focusing right now on a pretty niche segment of leadership consulting. The way that I understand it, you're consulting women who are business leaders in the aviation field, right? Tell me how you developed that niche and what excites you about coaching those women.
You know, I was just nominated to be the chairperson for Iowa International Aviation Women's Association for the Americas. So it's a very, very exciting association that has over 7,000 members. And the goal is to really inspire, connect, train, educate. And so what I'm finding in especially the mid to high level women in leadership, the training is quite limited. And surprisingly so, Alan, so many of the women at that, mid to kind of C level, they really are desiring training in be having a seat at the table, they want to learn more about being a presenter, presenting, doing a presentation. And it's almost mind boggling that they can be to this level. And not that that's so 101, but I think it's more they're wanting to kind of come out of themselves and really advance in their career. Yet they're, especially the mid-level, they want to get to the higher levels and kind of break the glass ceiling, but they realize they need some greater tools for that. So it's just really, I have a desire to really help in that leadership role to where they're expanding themselves to grow and develop more.
Now, that all makes perfect sense, but why aviation?
Oh my goodness. I've been in aviation since 2001. My entire family's in aviation, my husband and my daughter. And, as you well know, when aviation, it gets in your blood, it's, you just can't leave it, walk away from it. It's the most amazing situation, but I'm very passionate about aviation. I love it. And specifically for women in aviation, I'm just so very proud, Alan. I just worked and coached with a young professional. Her name is Isabella, and she's a recent grad from Arizona State University. Her father's in aviation in very prominent position. And I coached with her for several months and really put it out to the community. She had no aviation experience. And within about, I think we were no more than 4 months, I think it was about 90 days. And she landed her first job in aviation, in flight aircraft management services, and did very well for her salary and her position. I'm just real with a very prominent company called Jet Aviation. And so that just thrills me and excites me that a company in aviation, how we hear all the time, well, well, when you get some experience, we'll come back and talk to us. Well, where do I get it from? So that's a very exciting part of, helping that young professional and landing her first job in aviation.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah.
What are some of the unique challenges that women face in aviation in general, and then also in leadership roles in aviation?
Well, Alan, when I started my first job in aviation, it was with Jet Aviation, and I was the only vice president internationally, female vice president internationally. And so I firsthand experienced being the only woman in the room, and I sat at the table with the men, and it also was a tremendous challenge. I knew nothing about aviation. I did not know the acronyms. I thought for sure they were speaking a foreign language, and I was like, how am I going to possibly learn this? So there were lots and lots, challenges. I think it's earning the respect, from the men in the room. And my advantage was none of them really understood staffing and recruitment, because I ran a company at the time called Jet Professionals, a subsidiary of Jet Aviation. So, I really had to dig deep and learn how to communicate to men in the way that they would listen. And I think oftentimes that's a challenge for the male and the female on both sides, for the men to go, oh, okay, what are they saying? Or, it's kind of that Mars and Venus, which I will say, I bought the book Mars and Venus in the Workplace, and it helped me tremendously, even in writing my emails. So I think communications can be a real challenge. I think we've come a long way with the glass ceiling and women being able to reach that, but there's still challenges. I think I do believe we have to prove ourselves even more than, say, a man in the workplace. And I think just the leadership, especially in the leadership roles. But everybody has to prove themselves, for advancement. So I think it's a challenge in the salaries as well. So that's back to Iowa for a moment. International Aviation Women's Association. They're really focused on that executive female leadership. So they've designed and developed a 12 month program that really kind of zeroes in on that, Alan, and helps. The program is just going to come into effect, but it's just really about leadership, financial acumen. There's so many different topics we have designed for this 12-month program. So it's really targeting that and to help the women in leadership.
Linda, you said something a little while ago. You said that women had to earn the respect of the men. And my question there would be, do you think it's more difficult earning the respect of someone else, in this case, a woman earning the respect of the other men in the room? Or do you think it's more difficult to learn to respect yourself?
You're deep, Ellen. I think it's both. I think oftentimes how other women perceive another woman, so it's all going on. But I think we're talking about women in leadership and advancing. to where I think it has to be both. And I think you have that respect of yourself. That initially is how you'll gain the respect of a man or even another woman, a person. Let's just say the person. But without that respect for yourself, you've got a battle before you. I think that comes first. Absolutely.
So there's a respected religious leader that I've read, and he gave a speech that he entitled "The Loneliness of Leadership," and where
Mm.
he identified that oftentimes I think we look at a leader and we imagine that here they're if they're in aviation, for example, they've got this jet setter's life and the world at their fingertips. But what he talked about is how lonely someone can feel being in leadership. Do you encounter that with the women that you're working with, that loneliness is a challenge, that they have a hard time finding other women to connect with, or meaningful connections as they climb that corporate ladder?
Absolutely. And I think it can come from, again, that individual. It's like what I just shared a little bit ago. During a really, really tough time in my life, my world became very small.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that similar situation, um, a person in leadership, we're speaking specifically of women, yes, that they're, one, I think they're so fully loaded of responsibilities, or trying to do it all, and how do I compartmentalize and get my head around it. That in itself can also be a loner. Let me just woosha, at night or weekends. And I think truly it's finding the time to even have that reaching out to someone else to say, hey, let's go for coffee, or let's go do, I don't know, go run together, go work out together, or those kinds of things. That sometimes it's just there's so much on their plate. And then of course, if you have family, you have children, that even, I think, intensifies that loneliness, or your world's really small.
Was that challenging time that we talked about earlier when you felt the most lonely, or have there been other times after that when the loneliness was deeper than that for you?
There's been other times, Alan, and I think the greatest one would be our son passed away.
Mm.
And, you know, I think that was my, that was in 2015.
Yeah.
And I think it was just, that question of why. And if I could say to anybody in life, especially when you have a son or daughter pass away, that the answer to your why will never be there, because it's a time where you have to have that spiritual faith that it happened for a reason. And I think my greatest stress was when I would ask the why, and my stress level would rise up because the answers weren't there. So the
Mm.
moment, yes, I felt the emotion. I still feel the emotion today. But I had to quit asking why and just trust. And it helped that level of, you know, grieving, it really helped that aspect of my life to where I could um, not feel lonely, or not feel betrayed, and
Mhm.
guilt. Talk about guilt. So that's, I think again, let's even go to the women in leadership. None of us really know what's going on in their lives for any of us, that day, that week, that month, to where, many, I still had to go to work. I still ran the business. I still had to do this and still had to do that. Excuse me. But not many people would know I was going through those types of things in your life. And I think it's a really important part of life that if it be in a work environment, if it be in a personal relationship, it's understanding who you're before and not knowing what they could really be going through in life.
Do you feel like during that period that you weren't able to share what you were going through with the people that you were working with? And do you think if you had, would that have made that burden easier? Or do you think that would have compromised the workplace environment? Because I feel like you're right that a lot of times, in fact, I just heard on another podcast earlier this week that I was listening to that like 1 out of every 3 Americans doesn't even know the name of their next door neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked in places where you see people every single day,
Mm-hmm.
but you never really know what's going on. And so how do you, and I feel like it's an important part of leadership to be able to see other people and to meet them where they are. So how has that experience that you went through helped you in other leadership roles? Has it helped you to be more vulnerable with other people? How has that changed you?
That specific experience of my son passing away, I did go through, Alan, some allowing myself to be vulnerable to some people. But what I experienced was very interesting. I would choose on a particular day to maybe go there to share. And what was in front of my eyes was this individual couldn't handle what I was sharing. If that be emotionally, like it would almost be, there were some people, it was physically obvious. They really didn't want to hear it. So it was a real learning experience and I thought inside I would go, okay, I need to stop talking, make this very short and move away. Then there would be those that if I had chosen, they would be real emotional themselves, that then it affected me. It would, so it was a very interesting process. And then there were, as in time, I could really feel or see, know, whatever, that this is someone not to share that with, or I didn't want to, and I'm not saying I'm running around telling everybody, because even just sharing here on the podcast, it was, I can tear up with it, but I want to feel that it is a life experience that, God forbid, no parent should have to go through. And I think this can apply to just about everything that we might proceed to share with someone. They may not want it. And that's being, aware of, again, who you're in front of. And how do you really, life experiences help you be able to detect that? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the lesson there is to be really intentional with who you're in front of.
Yes.
Intentionally select a core group of friends, associates, mentors who can go with you into that experience and sit with you there. as we experience the hard things of life, because it doesn't need to be the loss of a child or the loss of a parent. It can just be a difficult challenge that you're facing
Absolutely.
financially or in work
Mhm.
or, whatever the situation may be. Linda, my dad really believed that it was the little things that were the most important things. And he said it frequently enough that that's what we put on his headstone was remember the little things. If there were just a few little things that you feel like would be most important for the women that you're coaching to understand, what would those little things be?
Mhm. You mentioned your father, Alan, my father as well was, you know, not a highly educated man whatsoever, but owned his own business for many, many years and successfully sold it. But he was so far ahead of his time and his wisdom was so phenomenal. And I had the honor of being his caregiver for 9 months before his passing. But his was the word fear. And we think fear, so often we all face on a daily basis fear of whatever it might be. But his words were fear means false evidence appearing real.
I like that.
And I use that to this day often false evidence appearing real. And I'll ask that often if I feel fear. Okay, is this false evidence? And I'm thinking it's real. And I think my next number two, Alan, would be gratefulness. If you can, that be a challenge on a daily basis to feel grateful for the small things, then it starts. And then, I think that's an important part in life, being a mother, a father, a leader in business, owning a business, directing other people in your leadership role, is that feeling of gratefulness, you know, for all aspects of life is invaluable.
I love those two things, and I would even suggest that if you reverse the order and you develop the skill of feeling grateful, that you'd be able to reduce the fear that you feel, because you've learned a superpower in feeling grateful.
Oh, that's
Linda, I'm
awesome.
grateful for you and for your willingness to share some of your time with us today. Thank you for being willing to share some of your story and being vulnerable today on the Plain Success podcast.
All right, Alan, thank you. I'm honored. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.